Hello and welcome into the KE Report. I'm your host, Shad Markwitz, and today we're getting an update on Omai Gold Mines. Omai is traded on the TSX.V under the ticker OMG and on the OTC markets under the ticker OMGGF. And I'm talking today with the president and CEO of Omai Gold Mines, Elaine Ellingham. And Elaine, it's great to get you back on the show. We had done a nice video presentation back in June overviewing the project. You have both the Wenot and the Gilt Creek projects in Guyana, South America. And you've got about 4.3 million ounces of gold defined thus far, but are building feverishly towards a updated resource that should be out in a couple of weeks, and we will get into that, and we will get into some of the drill results that your team has been putting out, which are really high grade over nice widths. But before we do any of that, I think it'd be nice to just take a moment and discuss Guyana as a jurisdiction. We've done this in the past, but you put out a email to your subscribers that really was breaking down, I guess, the spotlight that's on Guyana. The Fraser Institute, which some people listening may recognize, every year puts out an annual list of mining jurisdictions and how they rank them. And Guyana moved up from the 22 position just a couple of years ago, back in 2022, all the way up to the ninth position now. So it's a top 10 in the Fraser, and that's recognized internationally. It's also the number one Latin American and Caribbean jurisdiction to be in. In the best practices mineral potential index, it's seventh. So Guyana has gotten a lot of attention, and I'd even throw in that we've seen a couple big M&A deals there in the last couple of years, where Gold Source Mines was taken out by Mako Mining and where Reunion Gold was taken out by G Mining. And that leaves only a couple projects left in country, with Omai sitting pretty there with a large gold resource, a lot of development work going on, permitting work going on. So just maybe share with us, Elaine, your experience in country, maybe some misconceptions about Guyana, but then the boots on the ground reality of what it's like operating in one of the top 10 jurisdictions globally for mining.
Right. Yeah, good to be here, Shad, and catching up on this. But yeah, absolutely. A lot of people in the industry, for sure. We watch that Fraser Institute. It's always interesting to see. And I'm most surprised and not surprised by the ranking for Guyana, because absolutely our experience has been very positive there. And I think it's a very small population country, right? We've talked about that, 800,000 people. And there's like 50,000 licensed, registered small scale miners. So their mining is very, very important to the country, and historically has been, a major employer for a lot of the sort of the entrepreneurs, small scale miners. Yeah, so I mean it's a country that understands mining. The government, it's a small country, so you get to know them, a lot of face time with the key government people. And we've always, since the first day I got there, been given the strong message that they want to see Omai redeveloped. They want to see these large scale mines back in production. They're big employers, but not just that. It's in a lot of countries like Guyana. It's not just the people in the big cities at the coast. It's in the hinterland. And so, I mean, employment in the hinterland, it brings investment, it brings infrastructure, and the government of Guyana knows this. And one of the reasons, as you know, is Omai was in production between 1993 and 2005. And so not all that long ago. It's still in the memories of a lot of them, and they know exactly what kind of prosperity came from the operation of the Omai Gold Mine. So yeah, they want to see it redeveloped, and they're very supportive of these large scale mine developments.
Well, and to that point, I was going to save this for later in the discussion, but it seems like a good point to jump into it. You put out some news on June 23rd discussing advancing the permitting for your Oh My Gold project in country. And so you're working on the EIA, your environmental impact assessment. Anything you want to say there just to update the audience on the permitting process?
Right. I mean, we've been actually talking to the EPA, well, from day one, because obviously, being a past producer, we felt that there was a good chance this, in fact, was going to launch into something that could be a mine again. So they've always told us that they understand the site. They've been to the site. Some of the people at the EPA used to work at Omai. So yeah, so basically that's part of why we did a PEA last year, a preliminary economic assessment. It was a little early, but at the same time, the government, with us showing them that preliminary mine plan, we were able to get an environmental permit, and that allows us to actually get into the EIA process, the environmental impact assessment process. And that, of course, is way ahead of what you would in most countries. And this is again what has partly propelled them so high on the Fraser Institute list. countries like Canada and the US, I mean, they're great for mining and everything except for there's a long timeline on the permitting. And you know, these types of things, it takes a long time to make a discovery, to work up the deposit, then to go through a long permitting process. So in Guyana, yeah, it's definitely going to be fast tracked. And not to say that they don't still have very rigorous environmental standards. They do. They're very conscious of the biodiversity. But of course, for Omai, it's already a cleared site. It was a mine. The forest didn't regrow, so we have a leg up there as well.
Well, and let's remind people you brought up the PEA you put out last year, but that was really only on a portion of the project. I think it was about 45% of it, if memory serves. But you have both the Wenot and the Gilt Creek projects. They're nearby each other, but this is really only on part of the Wenot. And so the thinking here is, in addition to all of the drilling the company's doing and expansionary drilling and growing the resources, to eventually put out a combined PEA that shows the economics on the full project. Maybe just speak to that overall game plan.
Yeah, that absolutely was the game plan from the beginning. But last year, we knew that that PEA was just a preliminary and that it did satisfy a couple of things. One, it got us on the permitting path, very important. We knew that. And the other issue was, the market for juniors had been a little bit slow. And I don't think people really realized that this was a project, even though we had already put out two fairly substantial resource estimates. I don't think people saw this as having a direct path to get towards an economic mine. And so that achieved that. So we wanted to do it like we still had our eye on the main objective. And so what we did was we did it just on the open pit because it was faster than integrating in the underground and doing the underground mine planning. So the PEA was fairly fast, fairly inexpensive, but achieved a lot. And we always knew that our goal was to continue to expand Wenot and then integrate the underground mine at Gilt Creek. And so that's what we're going to go into. So we've got this resource coming up in the next 2 to 3 weeks, probably sometime second, third week of August, thereabouts. And then we're straight into looking at preparing a PEA that's going to be 3 or 4 months down the road. But that's always been the objective is, the underground plus the open pit.
Yeah, so it's kind of a staged approach here to unveiling the full potential of the project, and it's exciting to see it already worth the candle, but then as you start adding in the underground at Gilt Creek and the expansion at Wenot, it's only going to grow from what you put out last year. And those are always just a snapshot in time, but I think people are starting to wake up to that, and that's why you've had some good momentum in the share action and valuation of the company. But let's talk about some of the recent sizzle, Elaine. You put out a couple of good press releases at Wenot. Back in June on the 25th, the headline number there, 2.67 grams per ton gold over 21 meters, 2.31 grams per ton gold over almost 25 meters. So some good hits there. And then on July 29th, followed it up with 17 grams per ton gold over 7.5 meters, and then 2.64 grams per ton gold over 41.8 meters, almost 42 meters. So some really good grades over really good widths, continuing to expand the Wenot resources. Tell us about some of the key takeaways you'd like investors to know about how these are tying into the overall resource expansion.
Right, absolutely. I guess we've always been very pleased with the results out of Wenot, but I guess late last year when we started drilling a little bit more on what we call the dike corridor, we started hitting, these wide zones. I think the first really the eye opener, we hit 4.5 grams over 57 meters, which I think I can honestly say is the best intersection I've ever drilled in my life. And I thought I'd been on some really nice gold deposits, but that was just stunning. And we realized that one of the zones, as you know, there's multiple zones, but this one zone we call the dike corridor just blossomed out. And so we stepped out, and we were able to trace it along strike, really wide spacing initially, but along 600 meters. And so if you just think in your mind, if you have that kind of mineralization along 600-meter strike, that's incredible. So what we did was, although we wanted our main objective since last year's resource estimate has been, really basically testing how big is this Wenot deposit. When we saw those higher grade zones, we decided that it made sense to zoom in on those, like we're still not talking infill drilling, but to trace it to see exactly if we could put a bigger volume around that to see how continuous it was. Does it go shallower? Does it go deeper? Does it go long strike? And so that's what a lot of the drilling we've been doing is, and that's why you see you see these, I think one of the early ones, it was 3.16 over 68 meters, right? And for gold deposits, that's pretty phenomenal. So what you're seeing is a combination of us keeping to pursuing that wide zone, and then also just continue our expansion along this deposit. And this is 2.5 kilometers long. So it's 2.5 kilometers along strike. At the widest part, the Wenot is almost 400 meters across, and that's multiple zones. And then historically, like in the old resource, most of it was above 330 meters, mainly because, this was an old project that people kept saying, oh, you're just drilling under the old pit. So we had to prove to them, yeah, 87% of our resource was above 330 meters. And then, of course, as you know, then everybody turned to us and says, yeah, but does it go deeper? So that's what we've been doing. So the other thing you'll see is some of these are deeper because we're trying to see how deep all these various zones extend. So we went from focusing on above 330. Now we're trying to take it down to 450 meters depth, because we believe that, for a pit this size, it should be able to be 400 or 450 meters deep. So you're seeing a combination in our results of going after what we call them the fat zones, because we're not that creative, and then we go deeper. So all in all, it adds to what you're going to see culminating in that next resource estimate. And we have taken it down from 330 meters down to 450 meters and sometimes a little deeper, which is incredible.
Well, I think that's the other thing people are seeing is that, initially they knew that you were drilling a little more shallow, 330 and up, but that was filling in that to show that it was a robust pit. But now that you've drilled underneath that pit and shown that it can go down 400, 450 meters, it can be a deeper pit and a larger project. But it doesn't stop there. As far as testing the depth, you've got a very interesting drill hole that you're drilling through Gilt Creek, kind of on an angle through the underground. And I'll put an image of this down below so people listening in can see this visually. But you're going to go over and test way deep over at Wenot and thinking that, hey, if this trend extends like Gilt Creek, and if these deposits usually do have that depth component, let's go ahead and swing for the fences and test the deep side of Wenot. So maybe talk about this hole and why it's such a curious one, and it's something you've done previously in your career in other companies.
Yeah, that's right. And they're definitely the adventuresome, fun stuff, but also they're not crazy, because the Wenot deposits orogenic, so they're vertical zones. They tend to go to depth. If you look at a lot of the projects in Canada, and Ontario, Quebec in particular, these orogenic gold deposits, they do go very, very deep. So we are focusing our next mine plan in that PEA is going to be obviously focused on the Wenot deposit down to about 450 and the underground at Gilt Creek. But it begs the question, how deep does Wenot go? And so our goal has always been to get to that 18, 20-year mine life. But if Wenot goes deeper, then it changes things again. So what we've done is, we've drilled across Gilt Creek. We're going to keep that drill hole going. It's going to be probably almost a 2-kilometer long hole. And basically, we're at about 1.5, 1.6 kilometers right now. And we're hoping to intersect the Wenot deposit a full 500 or 600 meters below what we see above. And you sort of say, well, why would you do that? Because, it's not going to add to the resource. It's too far from it. But if we intersect it, then, which in my opinion, geology says we should, then what we show is it's not just a 20-year mine life you're going to be looking at it at Omai. It's probably a 30 or 40-year mine life. And that really does affect how companies or potential acquirers or developers, how you look at it. And so we think that's very important. And, it's a kick at the can. And what I like is, a lot of major companies wouldn't do this, but as a junior, you can do these things. The incremental cost is actually not that high. And so, it's definitely worthwhile. You were saying, yes, I have done it before and did it on an orogenic gold deposit in Ontario. We actually didn't intend to drill that deep. It's just the hole kind of wandered a bit. So we had a deposit, 1,200 meters vertical depth, very similar to what we're looking at here. It was 500 meters down plunge from any known mineralization. And we hit mineralization, and there's $1 billion shaft on that today. So, keep your fingers crossed, right?
Yeah, my fingers are crossed here that you guys do intercept it, and I think it would be a great proof of concept that you could have. And I think you're drilling so deep already now that there probably is going to be an underground component to Wenot. But if it's that deep and if it continues that far, then yeah, you can envision a decade or two being added onto the mine life, as you say, and you could really have a parallel underground system between Gilt Creek and Wenot. So a lot of synergies there for someone that wants to develop it into an even larger multi-decade project. So fingers crossed for sure, and we'll keep following up. And when those results come out, we'll definitely get you back on for an update. But let's focus on the near term, which is this upcoming resource. Just a quick follow-up on all the drilling you've been putting out. Will that still make it into the cutoff as far as will those latest results in June and July still be included in that upcoming resource?
Yeah, I think up to yesterday's press release, we have a few more straggler holes that are still at the lab. They probably won't make it in. The QP has been the qualified person there, our independent consultant's been working away at it. They usually work fairly cooperatively with you. We're in touch with them every few days, and we kind of had cajoled him into into yesterday's results, but that's probably all we're going to get into that. Now, I mean, this project, obviously, we're keeping moving it forward and the economic study coming up. So, we will still keep drilling these things. And to that point, like we still have the three drills turning. Obviously, one drill is on the deep hole. And then the other two drills, one of them's on a western extension about another kilometer west of Wenot. And then another one went onto a target we know as Blueberry Hill. So, so we're not going to stop drilling. We've got a great team. You can drill year round. There's no seasonality to our drilling in Guyana. We're very cost effective. So as you know, we financed earlier this year, and we still are very well funded. So yeah, no, we're going to keep going because that's what I said. Not a complete brilliance, but my theory on geology and finding things is where there's gold, there's more gold.
It's a
Seems to
good
be working for me.
it's a good philosophy, and you seem to keep finding more of it, Elaine. So hats off to you and your operations team on the ground in Guyana, and we'll keep following along with the news here. When you get the resource out, let's definitely circle up again and get you back on to unpack it for listeners here at the KE Report. And for people that are listening in, if you want to follow along with this news, I'd recommend clicking on the link below down in the show notes. It takes you right over to the Omai Gold Mines website, straight to their news section, where you can sign up for updates, hit your email inbox, or just follow along with the news as it hits. Obviously, the next key milestone is going to be that resource update. And Elaine, as always, looking forward to our next conversation.
Yeah, for sure, Shad. Thanks so much.